Okay, ladies and gentlemen. What we have then is this idea of population growth. So, this we are continuing talking about ecology. One of the things that we look at in ecology, of course, is how populations affect each other, how populations affect the environment around them. One thing that I want to, and this is not in your notes, but that's okay. One thing that I want to remind you of is what the definition of a population is. A population refers to all of the member of one species in one place at one time. So, if I'm looking at this picture of this coral reef, I see these blue kind of dory-looking fish. That's that is one population. I see these little like clownfish, like the Nemos. That's my second population. I have these orange and black fish. That is my third population. The yellow fish. That is four. The orange and white fish. That's five. The coral itself is alive. That's six. I have the starfish. That's seven. And I think that might be about it. Yeah. So in this picture alone, I am looking at seven different populations. Notice they are all in the same community because they're all living together. They are sharing an ecosystem because again, we see there's rock and there's water and there's all these abiotic factors, but they're all living together in the same space. So that means that they're going to be competing for resources, food, shelter, etc. There might be predators that hunt them, so they would have to be better at hiding from predators or running from predators. So nothing lives by itself. This is the whole concept of ecology. This idea that literally everything is going to be interconnected. All right? All right. So any questions on what a population is? All right, cool. All right, moving on. All right, so this is the first part that we are writing down, ladies and gentlemen. Take literally about 1 minute to write it down, and then we will continue forward. Did I seriously leave my phone? That's horrible.
Hey, Michael, will you also post a video for the students that don't get a chance to finish the notes?
What's that?
Will you also post a video for the students that didn't get a chance to finish the notes so they
Correct.
can copy down what
Yep,
we did today?
absolutely. They will
Okay.
be posted after class.
Okay.
All right, so there are three general terms that we use to describe population. We will talk. So in front of you, you have a picture of a population of emperor penguins in Antarctica. Like literally, as far as the eye can see, that's all penguins. When we talk about population size, we are talking about the actual number of individuals in this population. Now, I couldn't possibly count every single one of these penguins because that would take me forever. I'm sure somebody could, but let's just say that this population of penguins is 1,000,000 penguins. I'm totally guessing. I have no real idea. So if I had to sit here and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 you can count the number of individuals in this picture, in this area, and maybe there's 1,000,000. Okay. Another term that we use to talk about populations is population density. The population density is the number of individuals in a given area. So if I look at these penguins, they're really packed tight together. We would say that this is a dense population. Different, for example, from like a Bengal tiger. Bengal tigers live by themselves, and their hunting grounds are normally several, tens of square miles big. Um, so populations of Bengal tigers is a very low density. They're not packed really super close together like these penguins are. And then the other word that we use to describe populations is this idea of dispersion. Dispersion is how they are arranged in space, and we'll get into that in a minute. All right, take 1 minute, write it down, please. Okay, so one of the terms that we use when we talk about a population is this idea of dispersion. It's how many members of a population and how those members are arranged in a given space. Why do scientists care about dispersion? It's going to tell us stuff about how these animals reproduce. It might tell us something about how these animals protect themselves from predators. It might tell us something about the hunting pattern of a predator. Individuals in a population can be distributed according to three basic patterns of dispersion: random, uniform, and clumped. Random, as you can see in the picture, literally is we see these. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These 10 individuals are just kind of everywhere. We're kind of almost like wherever they want to be. Some of them are clumped close together, but then there's this guy over here all by himself. They're just sort of anywhere. Uniform normally will create a pattern. So here we see well, technically 11, but almost like that same number of individuals, but they are evenly distributed. Sometimes we call uniform dispersion even dispersion. And then we have clumped. Obviously, again, we have our same 10 dots here in the clump picture, but they're all grouped together, kind of like those penguins were, okay? So whether animals disperse themselves randomly, whether they disperse themselves uniformly or evenly, whether they disperse themselves in a clump, either way, that is going to tell us something about these populations of animals. Go ahead and take a minute, write it down.
Just for the last few. Never mind. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. You said you'll post a video. It's cool.
Yep. Okay, so when do we see random dispersion? Random dispersion literally is just scattered any which way direction. When do we see this happening in nature? Usually if the environment is uniform. In other words, let's take a look at the picture that we see here. We have pine trees in a random distribution. The pine trees just kind of land and grow wherever they want to be. It's there's no pattern. There's no uh, there's not necessarily a thing that goes along with it. How do we get this? Well, again, keep in mind, guys, this is a tree, which means that my trees require soil, they require sunlight, they require water. If trees live in a particular biome, the soil is usually all the same. The amount of temperature you get is always the same. The amount of water that you get for that particular biome is always the same. And the amount of sunlight that you get in a particular biome is always the same. These trees can grow wherever they want because no matter where they are, they have the resources that they need to grow, thrive, and be healthy. We will sometimes see random distributions in animals where they are solitary animals. For example, sloths in South America, they tend to be randomly distributed. All right, what about uniform dispersion? So these tend to be when we see equal distancing between the individuals. They are equally distributed and they form some kind of a pattern. So why do we see this? Normally we see this if there is a lot of competition for resources. Maybe there's only so much food, maybe there's only so much water. If you've ever been or seen maybe on TV, area like a river running through a pretty dry area, you see all the vegetation growing right along the river because that's the only water available. So sometimes we will see this uniform dispersion where you have spreading out based on resource competition. We see a lot of uniform dispersion with high level predators. We know that high level predators will mark their territory, which means that they will kind of like usually urinate on different parts of the forest or different parts of the savanna or different parts of the Tasia or whatever to sort of mark and let other predators know that, hey, this is my hunting ground and you better stay out of it. And again, because they're competing for resources. Clumped dispersion, however, happens when you have grouping in some places, but in other spots, there's like none at all. So again, why do we see this? It tells us that the resources, food, water, shelter, whatever it might be, tend to be kind of patchy. In other words, they're not equally distributed. There's not a lot of competition, but it's just a patchwork of systems. If you saw maybe that movie Morbius that just came out, that idea of a bat cave, right? Like that's because bats like to live in caves, but you don't get caves everywhere, so they tend to all clump together wherever there is a cave. Also, sometimes we will see clump dispersion as they will search together uniformly as a unit for food. We've all seen The Lion King. Think about how a lion pride works. Like they all stay together because the lionesses will go out and search for food together and then bring it back to the lion pride. But again, it's so that way they can create a search pattern throughout the savannah. Okay, population density. So this is the second term that we were talking about, this idea of population density. Oh, I'm sorry. Take a minute, write it down first before I talk. I just got really excited. Woo, populations. Okay, so population density, we sort of talked about this a little bit already when we looked at those penguins. These are going to be the number of individuals in a population that live within a given area. Again, why study density? Who cares? So again, the density of a population is going to help us look at how do these individuals interact. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that's a whole concept behind ecology. How organisms interact with each other, how organisms interact with the environment around them. So these interactions within the population density will help us understand reproduction, again, protection, eating patterns, and social hierarchies if they have any. An example of a social hierarchy, ladies and gentlemen, is, for example, when we look at clumping. For example, with bees, um, if you don't know, in a beehive, the queen bee is always really deep, centered in the center of that hive, surrounded by her drones, surrounded by her guardians. Why? She's the most important person or bee in the hive. So that tells us that central location surrounded by everybody else, that tells us that she is more important than the people on the peripheral, which can easily get picked off. All right, so up top here, I have a grouping of wildebeest, and down here, I also have wildebeest. Now, up here, I have maybe 8 individuals, and down here, I don't know, tens, if not maybe 100, probably more individual wildebeest. Which one, top or bottom, has the greatest population density? Who can tell me? You can say it out loud or you can say it in the chat. Top or bottom picture, which one is the more dense population? Thank you. Yep, the top. Why? Thank you. Yep. And why is that? Can anybody tell me that?
Can I come off mute?
Yeah, of course.
The grass is less green and the smaller populations of the animal. Not populations, but how can I say groups?
Yeah,
Smaller groups.
it's a small group of animals. They're all kind of packed in into this one little tiny spot. That's pretty dense. More individuals in the same amount of space. Now, if I look down here, if I had that same amount of space, maybe I'm going to get maybe one, possibly two. Now, if I look at the bottom picture, top or bottom picture, which one has the greater population size? Top or bottom, which one has a greater population size?
Bottom.
The bottom. And why is that?
Because they're evenly spread out and there's more of them.
Yeah, there's more of them. So again, population size is about actual numbers. There's way more wildebeest in the bottom picture. Population density is about how tightly are they packed together. Are they tightly packed together so it's really dense, or are they kind of spread out so it's not dense? Like those penguins that we saw at the beginning, really high population density. The wildebeest in this picture here, they're kind of spread out on the bottom anyways. They're all spread out all over the place. Density is pretty low. Good job, guys.
Miss Cano-Michael, I got one question. So
Yeah.
what happens if Antarctica, well, the North and Antarctica, you know how the snow is melting? What happens if that melt? What happened to the penguin population or the polar bear population? Let me see
Well,
here.
okay, so first of all, penguins live in Antarctica. They live in the south, actually. The penguins would probably be okay because under all that ice, there actually is a landmass. Like there's a continent called Antarctica underneath all of those glaciers. So yes, they would take a hit because it would be a change in their environment, but they would probably be able to adapt and they would probably be able to be okay. Um, in the
Probably.
Arctic, which is the North Pole, which is where the polar bears live, that becomes more problematic. There is no landmass in the North Pole. It's literally just water. The only reason it looks solid is because it's frozen ice. So most people believe that if the Arctic melts, the polar bear will go extinct because they will no longer have a habitat to live in.
Okay.
Take a minute, write this down. Okay, so whether we are talking about population size, whether we are talking about population density, whether we are talking about population dispersion, none of these are a conversation we can have unless we're talking about population growth. These populations either get larger or smaller depending on what is happening with the population. Excuse me. In general, if everything is healthy and good in the environment, natural populations of organisms will stay about the same from year to year to year. Okay? But sometimes they will suddenly increase and sometimes they will suddenly decrease if there is some sort of disruption or change to their environment. So let's say if all of a sudden more food becomes available, we're going to see an increase, a sudden increase, because hey, more food, more babies, right? If there's some horrible natural disaster and I don't know, there's a fire, like there's a forest fire, obviously we're going to see a huge decrease that year. But with everything as being okay, if everything's healthy, if everything's happy in the environment, there's not a fire or pollution or some crazy spike in food available, in general, our natural populations stay about the same from year to year to year. So, what are some factors that affect our population size? Well, really, populations can only do three things. Populations can go up, populations can go down, or populations are going to stay the same. That's the only three things numbers ever do. They go up, they go down, or they stay the same. What causes a population to go up? The things that can cause a population to go up are the number of births or immigration. So births make populations go up, immigration makes populations go up. So obviously births, we all know what that is. Immigration with an I means that we have movements of individuals into a population. They used to be someplace else and now they moved here. Immigration. Things that can make a population go down, on the other hand, are obviously number of deaths. These are going to bring our population down. And emigration with an E, that is going to bring our population down as well. Obviously, when things die, that brings the numbers down. And obviously, emigration with an E, emigration, is when people leave or numbers of a population leave an area. So again, let's think about that forest fire. Let's pretend there is a forest fire. All these deer that used to be there, now all of a sudden there's a forest fire, they're going to run. They're going to go. They're going to emigrate out of that space. And some of them might die, but some of them might immigrate to a new forest that's maybe not on fire. Okay? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, again, as the number of births or immigration goes up, populations can go up. If the numbers of deaths or emigrations go up, then obviously the population is going to go down because you have more deaths. In general, again, in general, if everything's good, everything's happy, everything's copacetic in your environment. Oh, nice. Thank you, Miss Decker. I didn't even think about that. Immigration with an I. Immigration is like in. Emigration with an E. Emigration with an E is like exit. So I for in, E for exit. That's how she remembers it, and that is a great way to remember it. But again, everything's good, everything's happy, nothing bad is happening in the environment. Usually the number of deaths, the number of births are about the same. The number of immigration, the number of emigration, also about the same, which is why it is that normally in a healthy environment, the number of a population is going to stay the same from year to year. Let me get rid of this. We're gonna have time for one more slide, and then I'm gonna stop it because if we're gonna do math, I'd rather do math all on one day. Yay, math! All right, take a minute, write it down. Okay, so population success is equal to how good that species can reproduce. How well does it grow? And what we tend to study sometimes is we can study how and why the number of individuals change over time. And we'll get into that a little bit more next week. Some of the causes for more births, some of the causes for more deaths, how interactions between different populations, predators, prey, affect these things. A simple term for looking at the growth rate of a population, lowercase r, is we just take the birth rate. And by the way, inside the birth rate, we are also going to be including immigration, and then minus the death rate. And of course, the death rate is also going to include emigration. So birth rate and immigration, add those two together, minus your death rate plus your emigration. If this number is positive, what that means is you have positive growth. In other words, the population is getting bigger. If this number is negative, what you have is a population that is shrinking. And there's problems with both. We prefer, as scientists, we prefer to see a R of 0. Nice and steady. Nothing really changing, because that tells us everything's healthy in the environment. But if we see a really high positive number or a negative number for too long, that's kind of a red flag. There are two types of population growth: exponential and logistical, and we will talk about those tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video. Give me a second.